The man at the dealership lowered his voice like he was about to confess something heavy, the kind of tone that usually precedes bad news or a secret that changes everything. He leaned over the polished counter, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made the air in the room grow still. "Ma'am, your father didn't just leave a car. You need to see what he left inside." I remember gripping the edge of the counter, my fingers going cold and numb, my knuckles turning white against the faux granite surface, because by then the car was already gone, sold. Gone like it never mattered, whisked away by a stranger's check and a signature that should have never existed. And yet somehow, through some impossible twist of fate or planning, my father still had the last word. 6 days earlier, the world felt like it had been pulled out from under me, though for entirely different reasons. I stood in my driveway staring at an empty space where that Mustang had sat for 20 years. The concrete was stained with the ghosts of oil spots and tire marks, a faded outline of a presence that was supposed to be eternal. The silence felt wrong. Not just quiet, but hollow, like something had been pulled out of the house itself, not just the garage. It was an amputation. I had just gotten back from a 6-month deployment. Nothing extreme this time, not like the black ops stories my father could have told if he were the type to share them. Logistics support, long hours, routine stress, the kind of low-grade anxiety that grinds you down like sandpaper, but enough to make you crave familiar things. A hot shower in your own bathroom, coffee that didn't taste like metal and despair. And for me, that car, my dad's Mustang, it wasn't flashy, never had been. A deep navy blue paint worn just enough to show its age without losing its dignity, like a boxer who still stands tall after 1,000 rounds. He used to say, "A car is like a man, you take care of it, it'll carry you through anything." He drove that Mustang through everything. Through my childhood, through my teenage years when we barely spoke, the silence in the car louder than the engine, through my mother's illness, through retirement when most men his age slowed down, but he never really did. 20 years behind that wheel. And then one day it became mine. Not in a ceremony, not in some grand gesture, just a quiet afternoon about a year before he passed. He handed me the keys in the garage. The light was filtering through the dusty windows, catching the chrome. "Take it," he said. "You'll understand someday." That was my dad, former Navy SEAL, not a man of many words. He spoke in actions and directives, in heavy silences. But when he spoke, you listened. It was a command, even when it sounded like a suggestion. Growing up, he didn't tell stories about his service. Not really. No war stories, no bragging, just lessons. Finish what you start. Don't cut corners. And never take something that isn't yours, even if no one's watching. He believed in ownership, responsibility, the weight of a man's word. Which is why standing in that empty driveway felt like more than loss. It felt like something had been broken, a covenant violated. I walked inside, dropped my bag by the door, the thud echoing in the hallway, and found my brother in the kitchen. He was leaning against the counter, scrolling through his phone like it was any other day, completely at ease in his betrayal. "Where's the Mustang?" I asked. He didn't even look up right away. That should have been my first warning, the casual dismissal of my existence. Finally, he shrugged. Casual, like I'd asked about a missing chair or a misplaced set of keys. "Yeah, I sold it." I blinked, the words not computing, the syntax familiar but the meaning alien. "You what?" Now he looked at me. No guilt, no hesitation, just a smooth, practiced indifference. "Sold it, got 80 grand for it. Not bad, right?" For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him. Like my brain just couldn't catch up to what he was saying, the reality of it too absurd to process. "That wasn't yours to sell." He sighed like I was the one being difficult, like I was the obstacle to his happiness. "Relax." A car. Just a car. The words hit me physically, a punch to the sternum. I felt something tighten in my chest, a coil of rage and grief winding together. That was Dad's car. "And now it's cash," he shot back, which I needed. "For what?" He hesitated just long enough to be noticeable, a flicker of something, shame, defiance, crossing his eyes. "Wedding stuff, Bill's life." Life. He said it like that explained everything, like the vague notion of life justified the auctioning of our history. My brother had always been different. Where I followed structure, he resisted it. Where I stayed steady, he drifted. Jobs came and went. Plans changed. Money slipped through his fingers like it didn't matter, water through a sieve. But this wasn't just another bad decision. This was crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. "Did you even think to call me?" I asked, my voice trembling with the effort to stay calm. He rolled his eyes. "You were deployed. What was I supposed to do? Wait 6 months?" Yes, I said quietly. You were, he laughed. Actually laughed, a sharp, barking sound. You're unbelievable. No, I thought, not me. Later that night, I sat alone in the garage. I hadn't turned on the lights, just sat there in the dim glow from the open door, staring at the empty space where the Mustang had lived. The shadows stretched long and thin, mimicking the empty spot in my chest. I could still picture it perfectly. The slight crack in the dashboard, the way the driver's seat leaned just a little to the left, the smell, leather oil, and something else I could never quite name, the scent of my father himself. My dad's presence lingered there, and now it was gone, sold for $80,000 like it meant nothing. I tried to sleep that night, but my mind wouldn't settle. Memories kept circling back like sharks. Driving with him when I was 16, hands gripping the wheel too tight while he calmly said, "Ease up, the car is not fighting you." The first time he let me drive it alone, the terror and the pride. The last time we rode together before he got sick, he didn't say much that day. Just sat in the passenger seat looking out the window, watching the world blur by. At one point he reached over and tapped the dashboard. "Take care of it," he said. I nodded. I meant it. And I had failed him before I even had a chance to try. The next morning I woke up with that same hollow feeling, a pit in my stomach that no coffee could fill. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, listened to the house settle around me, the creaks and groans of a structure missing a key component. My brother had already left. No note, no conversation, just gone like always, fleeing the scene of the crime. Around noon, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, expecting a telemarketer or a scam. "Hello? Ma'am, is this Emily Carter?" My name sounded formal coming from a stranger. "Yes, this is. My name is Mark from Riverside Auto Group. I believe we recently processed a vehicle connected to your family." My stomach tightened, a knot forming instantly. "The Mustang," I said, a pause. "Yes, ma'am." I closed my eyes, bracing for the finality of it. "What about it?" Another pause, longer this time, waited with hesitation. Then his voice dropped slightly. "Ma'am, your father left something inside the vehicle. Something we just found during inspection." I sat up straighter, my heart rate spiking. "What kind of something?" "I think it's best if you come in," a beat. "You'll want to see this in person." I stared at my phone after the call ended. For a long moment, I didn't move. Because somehow, despite everything, it felt like my dad was still reaching through all of this, like he knew, like he planned something. And for the first time since I got home, that hollow feeling shifted. Not gone, but different. Like something unfinished was waiting for me. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. The drive to Riverside Auto Group took about 25 minutes. I remember every mile of it. Not because the road was anything special. It wasn't just a stretch of familiar county highway lined with old gas stations, faded billboards, and diners that hadn't changed since the 80s. The kind of places my dad used to point out, telling me which ones had the best coffee or the worst service. But that morning, I barely saw any of it. My hands stayed tight on the wheel. My thoughts kept circling back to the same question. What could he have left behind that no one found until now? The dealership sat just outside town, clean, organized, the kind of place that prided itself on reputation. My dad would have respected that. I parked, stepped out, and for a moment I just stood there. Part of me wasn't ready, not for answers, not for whatever waited inside, but I'd spent too many years under my father's roof to walk away from something unfinished, so I went in. A man in his late 50s approached me almost immediately. Gray hair, pressed shirt, the kind of posture that said he took his work seriously. "Miss Carter," I nodded. "Mark," he said, offering his hand. "Thank you for coming in." His grip was firm, respectful. "My father used to say, you can tell a lot about a man by his handshake," I said without thinking. Mark gave a small smile. "Then I hope I made a decent first impression." "You did." There was a pause, brief but meaningful. He seemed to understand that this wasn't just a routine visit. "Come with me," he said. He led me through a side hallway past offices and service bays until we reached a quieter area in the back. And then I saw it. The Mustang. It sat under bright overhead lights, freshly cleaned, almost glowing. For a second, my breath caught because there it was exactly as I remembered it. The same deep navy paint, the same lines, strong and steady, the same presence. It looked cared for, respected, and that mattered more than I expected. I stepped closer, almost afraid to touch it, but I did. And my hand lightly along the hood. Still solid, I whispered. Mark stayed a few steps back, giving me space. "He took very good care of it," he said. "Yes," I replied. "He did." After a moment, I turned back to him. You said he left something inside, Mark nodded. We didn't catch it at first, it was hidden intentionally. That word landed intentionally. Where? He gestured toward the driver's side. Under the dash, there's a small panel most people wouldn't notice. I opened the door. The familiar creak hit me like a memory. For a second, I just stood there taking it in. The worn steering wheel, the faint scent of leather and time, the quiet weight of everything this car had seen. Then I leaned down following his direction, and there it was, a small compartment, subtle, easy to miss unless you knew where to look. My dad knew. Of course he did. Mark handed me a small envelope. We didn't open it, he said. Figured it was meant for you. I took it. My name was written across the front in his handwriting, steady, precise. My chest tightened. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I just held it, because once I did, there was no going back. Take your time, Mark said quietly. I nodded. Then finally, I opened it. Inside was a folded letter and something else. A small, worn Navy SEAL coin. I recognized it instantly. He used to carry it everywhere, said it reminded him of who he was, even after the uniform came off. My hands trembled slightly as I unfolded the paper. Emily, if you're reading this, then things didn't go the way I hoped. I swallowed hard, already knowing he expected something like this. I taught you and your brother the same things. Not because you were the same, but because I believed you both deserved the same chance to do right. Life doesn't always work out that way. I paused, my vision blurring slightly. Mark stayed silent behind me. That car isn't just metal, you know that it carried more than miles. It carried lessons, time, mistakes, second chances. I left it to you because you understand the weight of things. A deep breath, I kept reading. If it's gone, then something went wrong. And if your brother had a hand in it, don't be too quick to hate him. That stopped me. Not because I agreed, but because it sounded exactly like him. Measured, controlled. Even now, he's always been looking for something he didn't know how to earn. That doesn't make him a bad man, but it does mean he'll make bad choices. My grip tightened on the paper. What matters is what you do next. Not to get even, but to make it right. I exhaled slowly. That was him. No revenge, no anger, just responsibility. At the bottom of the letter, there was one more line. Check the title. I frowned slightly. Check the title, I murmured. Mark stepped closer. What is it? I looked up at him. I think my father knew this might happen. Mark nodded slowly. Wouldn't be the first time I've seen something like that. What do you mean? He folded his arms lightly. Sometimes people leave things arranged. Paperwork, ownership details, protections, a beat. You might want to verify how that car was legally transferred. The words settled in slowly, carefully, like pieces of a puzzle starting to click. I looked back at the Mustang, then at the letter in my hands, then at the coin. My dad hadn't just left me a car. He'd left me a plan. And suddenly this wasn't just about loss anymore. It was about truth. About what was rightfully mine and about a brother who might not have understood what he'd actually done. I folded the letter carefully, slipped the coin back into the envelope, then turned to Mark. I need copies of everything related to that sale. His expression didn't change, but there was a quiet respect in his eyes now. I figured you might. As I walked out of the dealership, something inside me had shifted. The grief was still there. The anger too, but now it had direction, purpose. My brother thought he sold a car. What he really sold was something he never fully understood. And I was about to find out exactly how far that mistake went. I didn't drive home right away. Instead, I sat in the parking lot with the engine off, the envelope resting on my lap. The letter was folded neatly again, but it didn't feel closed. Not really. It felt active, like it had opened something that couldn't be shut back down. Check the title. That line stayed with me. Simple, direct, exactly how my father spoke when something mattered. I'd learned a long time ago not to ignore instructions like that, especially from him. I pulled out my phone and called the county clerk's office. It wasn't complicated. Small town systems rarely are. After a few transfers and a short wait, I was speaking to a woman named Linda, who sounded like she'd been working there for decades. I need to verify the title history of a vehicle, I said. Recently sold 1968 Mustang. She asked for the VIN. Luckily, Mark had given me a copy of the dealership paperwork before I left. There was a pause while she typed, then another, and then her tone changed just slightly. Well, now, she said quieter. That's interesting. Felt my back straighten. What is it? Another pause. This vehicle, it wasn't solely owned by your brother. My grip tightened around the phone. It couldn't have been, it was my father's. Yes, ma'am, and according to this, your father placed the title under a joint structure before he passed. My heart skipped. Joint with who? With you. For a moment, I didn't speak, didn't move, didn't breathe. That means, Linda continued gently. Any sale of the vehicle would have required your signature as well. I stared out through the windshield, but I wasn't seeing the lot anymore. I was seeing my father in the garage handing me those keys. You'll understand someday. And if it didn't? I asked quietly. If your signature wasn't present, she said, choosing her words carefully, then the sale may not have been legally valid. There it was, clear, simple, just like him. Thank you, I said. Of course, honey, she replied. You might want to talk to a lawyer. I ended the call and set the phone down. My hands were steady now, strangely steady because something had shifted again. Up until that moment, I'd been dealing with grief, with anger, with the kind of hurt that sits deep and doesn't move easily. But this was different. This was structure. This was right and wrong. This was something I could act on. My father hadn't just left me a message. He'd left me protection. And suddenly I understood something he'd written. Make it right. I didn't go home, not yet. Instead, I turned the key in the ignition and drove straight to my brother's place. He lived across town in a newer development. Cookie-cutter houses, small lawns, cars that looked leased rather than owned. The kind of place that tried hard to look stable. I parked in his driveway, sat there for a moment, then got out. He opened the door before I even knocked like he'd been expecting me. Hey, he said, casual as ever. You look intense. I stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. We need to talk, he sighed. About the car again. Yes, he shut the door behind me. Look, I already told you didn't have the right to sell it. That stopped him just for a second, then he shrugged again. There it is, he said, back to that. It wasn't yours. It was Dad's, he snapped. And Dad's gone. The words hit harder than he probably intended, but I didn't react, not emotionally, not this time. Did you sign the title? I asked. He frowned slightly. What? The paperwork, did you sign it? Yeah, obviously. Did I? That pause again, longer this time. What are you getting at? He asked. I held his gaze. The car wasn't just in your name. Silence. It was jointly owned, I continued. With me. His expression shifted. Confusion first, then something else, something tighter. That doesn't make sense. It does, I said calmly. And it means you sold something you didn't fully own. He laughed, but it didn't land right this time. You're serious? Yes, that's not how it works. It is exactly how it works. The room felt smaller now, quieter. Even the air seemed heavier. You're saying the sale wasn't valid, he asked. I'm saying you didn't have the legal right to make it a loan. He ran a hand through his hair. That's not what the dealership said. They wouldn't know unless you told them. Another silence. This one longer, deeper. You're going to undo it, I said. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even a demand, just a statement. His jaw tightened. You don't get to just walk in here and... I'm not here to fight, I said, and I meant it. That was the difference now. I'm here to fix something that should have never happened. He looked at me, really looked this time. And for the first time since I got back, I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Not arrogance, not dismissal, doubt. What if I can't? He asked. The question came quieter than I expected, more honest. I took a breath, then answered just as calmly. Then we figure it out. Because this wasn't about winning anymore. It wasn't about proving him wrong. It wasn't even about the car. It was about restoring something that had been broken. Something my father had tried right up until the end to hold together. Family. I turned toward the door. We're going back to the dealership tomorrow, I said. He didn't argue, didn't agree either, just stood there processing. And as I stepped outside into the late afternoon light, I realized something else. This wasn't going to be easy. Not legally, not emotionally, but for the first time since I came home, I wasn't lost anymore. I had a direction, and I was going to see it through. The next morning came slower than usual. Not because time had changed, but because everything felt heavier, more deliberate, like each step mattered now in a way it hadn't before. I woke up early out of habit. The house was quiet, same as always, but the quiet didn't feel hollow anymore. It felt waiting. I made coffee the way my dad used to. Strong, no sugar, just a splash of milk. He used to say, if you need to dress it up, it probably wasn't good to begin with. I smiled faintly at that. Small things like that had a way of sticking. By the time my brother showed up, I was already dressed. He looked tired. Not physically, he'd slept, but something in his posture had shifted. Less casual, less certain. You ready? I asked. He nodded once. Yeah. No sarcasm, no shrug, just quiet. We drove separately. I don't think either of us said it out loud, but we needed that space. Time to think. Time to process. Time to step into something we couldn't take back. When we got to the dealership, Mark was already waiting. He greeted us the same way he had greeted me the day before, steady, respectful. But his eyes flicked briefly to my brother. measuring, understanding. "Good to see you again," he said. "You too," I replied. I gestured slightly toward my brother. "This is him." Mark gave a small nod. "Sir." My brother nodded back, a little stiff. We didn't waste time. Mark led us back to the same area, and there it was again. The Mustang. Smaller, tighter, hidden even better than the first. I glanced back at my brother. He looked confused. "Dad did this?" he asked. "Yes," I said, because of course he did. I opened it. Inside was a small metal box, old, scratched, locked. Mark handed me a key. "We found this taped inside the glove compartment." I took it, turned it over in my hand. My father had planned every detail. The lock clicked open with a soft, final sound. And inside, photographs, dozens of them. I picked one up. It was old, faded slightly at the edges. My dad in uniform, younger, standing beside the Mustang when it was still new. Next photo, me maybe 8 years old, sitting on the hood, smiling wide. Another, my brother, teenager, arms crossed, trying too hard not to smile. I felt something shift in my chest. Not sharp, not painful, just deep. "Keep going," Mark said quietly. Beneath the photos, more documents carefully folded, protected. I opened the first one. Title paperwork, original, then updated, then revised again. I skimmed quickly, then slowed, then stopped because there it was clear as day. Transfer of ownership from my father to me. Not shared, not partial. Complete, my breath caught. "That's not," my brother started, but I kept reading. There was an earlier version, joint ownership, but the final revision, it had been changed, signed, notarized, filed before he passed. I looked up slowly. "He changed it," Mark nodded. "It happens sometimes, people update things late." My brother stepped closer now. "Let me see." I handed him the paper. He scanned it faster than I had, like he didn't want to fully absorb it. This doesn't make sense." "It does," I said. "He never told me." "He didn't tell me either." That part mattered because it meant something. My father hadn't wanted a fight. He hadn't wanted confrontation. He had just made a decision and trusted time to reveal it. There was one more document in the box. A second letter, shorter, more direct. I unfolded it. "Emily, if you're holding this, then things went further than I hoped. The car is yours. Not because you earned it more, but because you understood it. Your brother, he's still learning." I paused. My brother was watching now. Really watching. "Don't use this to punish him. Use it to remind him." I exhaled slowly. "Some things aren't meant to be taken. They're meant to be carried." That was it. No signature, no extra words. He didn't need them. I folded the letter carefully, placed it back in the box. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then my brother said quietly, "I didn't know." I believed him, not because he deserved it, but because I could hear it. "You didn't ask," I replied, not harsh, just honest. He nodded slightly like he knew that was true. Mark stepped in gently. "Legally," he said, "this changes things." We both looked at him. "The sale may be reversible." The words hung there, heavy, real. My brother let out a slow breath. "This is a mess." "Yes," I said, "it is." But it wasn't chaos anymore. It had shape, direction, truth. And standing there with my father's car, his words, and everything he had left behind, I realized something clearly. This wasn't about getting the car back. It was about making sure what he stood for wasn't lost with it. We didn't leave the dealership right away. No one rushed. That was something I noticed about moments that mattered. They didn't move fast. They settled in, took their time, made sure you felt every part of them. Mark guided us into a small office just off the main floor. Nothing fancy. A desk, a couple of chairs, a coffee machine in the corner that looked like it had seen better days. It reminded me of places my dad used to sit, quiet rooms where decisions got made without a lot of noise. Mark closed the door gently. "Let's go over where things stand," he said. He didn't sound like a salesman anymore. He sounded like someone trying to do right by all sides. I sat down first. My brother followed slower this time, less sure of himself than I'd ever seen him. Mark laid out the paperwork on the desk. "The vehicle was sold under your brother's signature," he said, looking at me. "But based on what we just reviewed, he didn't have full legal authority." He paused, then looked at my brother. "That puts us in a complicated position." My brother rubbed his face. "Complicated? How?" Mark leaned back slightly. "Well, legally speaking, the sale could be challenged, potentially voided." "Meaning?" my brother asked. "Meaning the buyer could be required to return the vehicle." Silence. But Mark continued, "That doesn't happen cleanly. There are contracts, payments, third parties involved." "Of course there are," my brother muttered. I stayed quiet, listened. That was something the Navy drilled into you early. Don't speak until you understand the situation. Mark turned to me. If you pursue this formally, it becomes a legal matter, attorneys, courts, time. How much time? I asked. He shrugged slightly. Months, maybe longer. I nodded. That made sense. Nothing worth fixing ever came easy. And the buyer? I asked. Mark hesitated, then answered carefully. Older gentleman, local veteran. That landed. Of course he was. He knew what he was buying, I asked. Yes, Mark said. He appreciated the car, asked about its history. Your father's name came up. I looked down at the table. My dad's name carried weight, even now. He didn't do anything wrong, Mark added. From his perspective, everything was legitimate. I know, I said, and I meant it. This wasn't about punishing the buyer. My brother shifted in his chair. So what? He just gives it back. Mark shook his head slightly. Not just like that. I leaned forward. What are the options? Mark folded his hands. We can reach out to him, explain the situation, present the documentation, and then, I asked. Then we see how he responds. Fair enough. My brother let out a short breath. This is unbelievable. I turned to him. Is it? He looked at me, really looked this time, and there was something different there. Not defensiveness, not anger, uncertainty. I didn't know, he said again. I know, I replied. That didn't erase anything, but it mattered. Mark stood. I can make the call, he said, but I think it would mean more if you were both there. I nodded. Let's do it. My brother hesitated, then nodded too. Mark stepped out to make arrangements, leaving the two of us alone. The room felt quieter now, not tense, just honest. You really would have waited, my brother asked suddenly, for me to get back. I didn't answer right away, not because I didn't know, but because I wanted him to hear it clearly. Yes, I said. He looked down, nodded slowly. I didn't think about it like that. I know, another pause. I thought, he started, then stopped. Thought what? I asked. He shrugged slightly. Thought it was just sitting there. That word again, just. It wasn't, I said quietly. He nodded. I see that now. And for the first time since this started, I believed him. Mark came back a few minutes later. He's available this afternoon. He said we could come by. That was quicker than I expected. Good, I said. We stood, gathered the documents, the letters, the box, everything my father had left behind. As we walked out, I glanced back once more at the Mustang. Still sitting there, still steady. It hadn't gone anywhere. Not really. And somehow that felt like exactly the kind of thing my father would have planned. The drive to the buyer's house was quiet. My brother followed behind me this time. No racing ahead, no shortcuts, just steady. The house was about 15 minutes outside town. Older, well-kept American flag by the porch, tools lined up neatly along the side of the garage. My dad would have approved. We parked, stepped out, walked up together. Mark knocked. A moment later, the door opened. The man standing there looked to be in his 70s. Strong posture, clear eyes, the kind of presence you don't fake. He took one look at us, then at the folder in my hands and nodded. Come on in, he said. No surprise, no confusion, just understanding. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't going to be a fight. It was going to be something else, something my father would have respected. The man introduced himself as Walter Hayes. His voice was steady, the kind that came from years of saying only what needed to be said. Not sharp, not soft, just grounded. Have a seat, he said, gesturing toward the living room. We stepped inside. The house smelled faintly of wood polish and coffee. The furniture was older but well kept, nothing flashy, nothing out of place. There were photographs along the walls, military ones, family ones, the kind of life that had been lived with intention. My father would have respected that. Walter didn't rush us. He sat across from us, hands resting lightly on his knees. I figured this might happen, he said. That caught me off guard. You did, I asked. He nodded. Not the details, but something about that car. He glanced toward the window like he could see it even from inside. It had a story. I felt my grip tighten slightly on the folder. It does. Mark stepped in gently. Mr. Hayes, we've uncovered some documentation that changes the ownership structure. Walter raised a hand. Before you show me anything, he said, I'd like to hear it from her. He looked at me, not impatient, just direct. So I told him not everything, not the full weight of the last few days, but enough. About my father, about the Mustang, about the letter, about the title. I didn't raise my voice, didn't accuse anyone, didn't dramatize it, just told the truth. When I finished, the room stayed quiet. Walter leaned back slightly, taking it in, then he nodded. Sounds like your father was a thoughtful man. He was, I said. Walter looked at my brother next. And you? My brother shifted. For a second, I thought he might deflect, make a joke, shrug it off like before, but he didn't. I messed up, he said. Simple, clear, no excuses. Walter studied him for a moment, then nodded once. That happens. Not approval, not dismissal, just acknowledgement. Mark handed Walter the documents. He took them, adjusted his glasses slightly, and read through everything carefully. No rushing, no skipping. The room stayed quiet while he did. The only sound was the faint ticking of a clock somewhere in the house. After a few minutes, he set the papers down. Well, he said legally, it looks like you're right. He looked at me. The car wasn't his to sell. My brother exhaled slowly. Like hearing it out loud made it more real. Walter continued. That puts me in an interesting position. I nodded. I understand, and I did. This wasn't his mistake. He tapped the papers lightly. I paid $80,000 for that car, fair price given what I knew at the time. That makes sense, I said. He leaned forward slightly. I didn't buy it to flip it, didn't buy it to show it off. Another glance toward the window. I bought it because it reminded me of something. I waited. My first deployment, he said. Different time, different war, but same feeling. He paused. Came home and bought a car just like that. Not because I needed it, because it meant something. I understood that more than I expected to. Walter looked back at me. So here's the question, he said. What does it mean to you? I didn't answer right away, not because I didn't know, but because I wanted to say it right. It's not just a car, I said. It's the last thing my father trusted me with. Walter nodded slowly. That's what I thought. Another quiet moment passed. Then he leaned back again. Well, he said, I'm not interested in keeping something that wasn't meant to be mine. My brother looked up quickly. I felt something in my chest loosen, but Walter wasn't finished. That said, he continued, I'm not in the habit of losing $80,000 either. Fair, completely fair, I wouldn't expect you to, I said. He studied me for a moment, then gave a small nod. So here's what we're going to do. The room seemed to settle. You buy it back, he said. Same price I paid. I blinked. That's it. Walter gave a faint smile. That's it. No markup, no leverage, no advantage taken, just fair. My brother spoke up. I don't have that kind of money. Walter looked at him. I didn't ask if you did. Silence. I took a breath. I can cover it, I said. My brother turned toward me. You shouldn't have to. I'm not doing it for you, I said. Not harsh, just clear. I was doing it because it mattered. Walter nodded. That's your choice. I looked down at the papers, then back up at him. Thank you, I said. He waved it off lightly. Your father did the hard part. I'm just making sure it lands where it should. That sounded like something my dad would have said. We stood, shook hands. This time when Walter gripped mine, I felt it. That same quiet strength, that same understanding, outside. The afternoon light felt different, softer somehow. My brother stood beside me, not speaking. After a moment, he said, I didn't think it would go like this. Neither did I replied. Another pause. I'll pay you back, he said. I looked at him, really looked. Then start by showing up, I said. He nodded. And for the first time in a long while, that felt like enough. We got back in our cars, drove back toward the dealership, toward the Mustang, toward something that had almost been lost, but wasn't, because some things aren't meant to be taken. They're meant to be carried. The day I brought the Mustang home, I didn't say much. There wasn't a need for it. Some moments don't call for words. They just ask you to be present. The engine started the same way it always had. A low, steady rumble. Familiar, certain, like it had been waiting. I rested my hands on the wheel for a second before pulling out. The leather felt worn in all the right places, not damaged, not aged out, just lived in. As I drove, memories didn't rush in like they had before. They came slower now, gentler, like they had settled into their place. My father in the passenger seat, quiet but watchful, his hand tapping the dashboard when I took a turn too fast. The way he never raised his voice, but somehow you still corrected yourself. Take care of it. I understood that now, not just the car, everything. When I pulled into the driveway, I parked it in the same spot it had always been. Engine off. Silence. But this time, the silence didn't feel empty. I sat there for a while, then stepped out, walked around it once, slow, deliberate. The house looked the same. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. My brother showed up later that afternoon. He didn't text, didn't call, just showed up. That mattered. He stood at the edge of the driveway for a moment, looking at the Mustang, then at me. You got it back, he said. I did, he nodded slowly. I didn't think you would. I didn't think I would either. We stood there for a while, no tension, no raised voices, just quiet. Then he walked closer, ran his hand along the side of the car, the same way I had. I remember this, he said. I know. Another pause. I was a kid, he continued. Dad used to take us out on Sundays, just drive, no reason. I smiled faintly. Yeah, he never talked much, my brother said. No, I replied. He didn't. but you always knew what he meant. That was the truth of it. My brother stepped back, looked at me. I should have called you, he said. Yes. I should have asked. Yes. I didn't. Number, he nodded, accepted it, didn't argue, didn't explain it away. I was thinking about money, he said. About pressure, about everything I didn't have figured out. I listened. And I told myself it didn't matter, he continued, that it was just sitting there, that word again. It wasn't, I said. I know that now. We stood there, the car between us, not as a barrier, but as something shared. I'm going to pay you back, he said. I shook my head slightly. That's not the point. He frowned. Then what is? I took a breath, looked at the Mustang, then back at him. The point is you don't do it again, he nodded. Not with this, I continued. Not with anything. Another nod, stronger this time. I won't. And for the first time, I believed him, not because he said it, but because he understood it. That was the difference. We didn't hug. That wasn't us. But something settled, something repaired. Not perfect, not complete, but real. That evening, I sat out on the porch, the sun dipping low, the air cooling. The Mustang sat in the driveway, quiet, steady. I held the small seal coin in my hand, turned it over slowly. My father had carried this through everything. War, loss, life, and now it was here. I thought about everything that had happened. The anger, the loss, the choice to move forward instead of strike back. It would have been easy to turn it into something else, to make it about punishment, about proving a point. But that wasn't what he taught me. He taught me that what you carry matters more than what you take. That legacy isn't something you sell. It's something you live up to, and sometimes it's something you have to protect, even from your own family. I looked out at the car one more time, then down at the coin. Got it, I said quietly. If this story meant something to you, if it reminded you of someone you've lost or something you've been trusted with, take a moment, hold on to it, share it. Because the things that matter most aren't always the things we can replace. And if you believe in stories like this, quiet ones, real ones, you're always welcome here.